You may or may not, depending on which news outlets you adhere to, have actually noticed that events have been going on in Leicester. What events? Well, running street battles between sometimes hundreds of marauding young men. They appear to have been battles which are sectarian in nature, battles between Hindu men on one side and Muslim men on the other side. Always all men, police often getting in the middle, huge numbers of police officers having to be on the streets night after night after these street battles began after an Asia Cup cricket match between India and Pakistan on August the 28th that took place in the United Arab Emirates. So why on earth are these street battles taking place? What is going on? Let's talk about this with Dr. Rakib Ihsan. He's a social policy analyst and writer and joins us now. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julie. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. I've spent the weekend getting the usual accusations of being a racist for tweeting about the events that have been happening in Leicester, asking why we've got violence between Hindu men and Muslim men on the streets of not Pakistan and India, but of Leicester. Apparently the thing I said that was the unacceptable thing, I hadn't realised, but apparently unacceptable question to ask was, how is that there's benefits of multiculturalism? How are they working out for us? I think, for us in this country right now. And a lot of people are asking why on earth we've got clearly some very unpleasant, violent, sort of secular, sectarian battles going on the streets of the UK. Can you talk us through what's happening and who's involved?
Well, firstly, Julie, I'll make the point that there's been a great deal of complacency, especially in places such as Leicester. And the reality is that many people will say diversity is our strength, but it's only our strength if it's tied together around a set of shared values, common obligations and mutual respect. I think the problem that we're seeing in Leicester is a mixture of factors. In recent times, there's been a communalisation of local politics there in Leicester. What I mean by that is local politics is being increasingly dominated by religious identity politics, foreign territorial disputes over Kashmir. And that's meant that local bread and butter issues such as education, health,
bin collections,
exactly, that's being increasingly sidelined. On top of that, also in Leicester, I think there's a problem with out-of-town agitators. Reportedly, there have been troublemakers from other major cities such as London and Birmingham coming into Leicester and exacerbating those community tensions. And I suspect that Leicestershire Police may be somewhat inexperienced when it comes to handling the various forms of social disorder that we've seen in Leicester. And then thirdly, we have to talk about immigration, something that many people don't want to talk about at all. There's concerns that the recent arrival of Indian subcontinental migrants with radical ideological beliefs, especially from India, which is increasingly becoming a hotbed of Hindutva ideology, Hindu nationalism, that is worsening the situation, that their involvement is also exacerbating those tensions. So you can see it's a mixture of domestic and international factors.
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah, very, very complicated, all those different factors coming in. And it's something that I think we can't say is completely new to us, because we've seen this sectarian voting, the sectarian divisions in places like Northern Ireland. People are pointing out to me over the weekend, you see it, between, say, Rangers and Celtic fans, when people are saying the BBC's first report on this was all about it was all to do with a cricket match, and that was what was going on, and wasn't even explaining the two different groups of men who were involved. Everyone is sort of tiptoeing around, saying, "Oh, don't say anything because it's all a bit uncomfortable, and everyone will shout the R word at you." But the reality is, we have imported some sectarian divisions which we did not have in this country previously. Now, lots of people saying, oh, well, it was our colonial activity that created these problems in the first place. But, not in the last 10 years we didn't. So what do you make of the way this has been reported? Particularly, I think the BBC didn't even mention who the young men were in the first instance.
Well, I think that some of the media coverage has been unfortunate, to say the least. I've seen some commentators try to blame the far right for what's going on in Leicester. And I think that there just has to be an understanding within particular communities that they have to take responsibility. That's the truth.
Hold on a minute. Now, this is what I don't like. I mean, I don't think that, for instance, Catholics in Northern Ireland have to take responsibility for, when the IRA was bombing people and things. I don't think that the Muslim community has to take responsibility for some loutish men who also happen to be Muslim on their behaviour, and the same for the Hindu community. So what way are the communities to blame?
Well, I think that what I mean by that is that there's been a lack of social and political leadership in Leicester. The reality is, Julia, that in hyper-diverse areas, cities and towns such as Leicester, cultivating and maintaining social cohesion in those areas requires hard work. And I think that without that hard work, without those efforts in terms of trying to bind communities together over when it comes to shared obligations or objectives, that can unravel very quickly, especially when ultra-religious identity politics and foreign-inspired sectarianism manages to worm its way into British life. So that's what I mean by that. And I think that the socio-political leadership, you could say, in Leicester, they have a tendency to deflect these kind of problems and try to blame it elsewhere.
But not only blaming it on the far right, but again, the media is pretending nothing to see here. And there's an awful lot of nothing to see here when it's the wrong people committing the outrages. I mean, the scenes we've seen, I mean, there are a huge number of videos of dozens and dozens, sometimes in the hundreds of young men. One group of men on the Muslim side, one group of men on the Hindu side. That's the reason why they're in those groups. That is, I'm not casting aspersions. That is a simple statement of fact. Wearing masks, often wearing balaclavas, some holding blocks of wood and things, smashing in cars, damaging a Hindu temple at one point on one side, accusations on both sides of very very poor violence, and yet this didn't make mainstream media at all for quite a long time. I wasn't aware of it until the weekend, and I know for a fact that if this had been right-wing, far-right thugs, this would have been all over the news.
Well, I think that for many people, they find it very difficult to comprehend that you can have social tensions that don't involve white British people. I think that's the truth of it. But I think that you'll actually see that many people within ethnic and religious minorities are all too aware that some of the sharpest, most severe social tensions in modern day Britain don't involve the white British mainstream at all. And that Leicester historically has been seen as this paragon of social cohesion. But it shows that how that can quickly unravel if you do not put the work in and you don't invest in social cohesion.
And I'm wondering how much is social cohesion, how much what David Cameron identified in his premiership as as parallel communities. So you'll have a Muslim community, a Hindu community, you'll have an Afro-Caribbean community some way, a white community, and actually people living almost parallel lives as if they're living in different countries.
Well, I'd made the point that I think labels such as Hindu community and Muslim community, that actually ignores the fact that there's a great deal of sectarian discrimination within those religious communities. But I think the one thing that David Cameron said correctly was that our state-enforced multiculturalism has failed. All too often it promotes difference over commonality. And we've had mainstream politicians actually fraternising with Hindu and Islamist organisations.
So, that's the reality check we need to have. We're going to talk more about this. Really appreciate you joining us, Rakib Hassan. More on this coming up. This is Talk Breakfast.